With Figma Sites, you can design and publish your entire website all from within Figma. No code, no dev, no complicated stack. Just drag, drop, design, and go live. You can even set up shared libraries so your team uses the same blocks, colors, and styles, keeping everything consistent and on brand. In this course, I'll guide you from basics to more advanced topics, all the way to launching your site. We'll start from scratch using the Figma pre-built blocks, perfect for beginners. I'll show you how to connect subpages, add custom elements, and bring your site to life with simple interactions as well as smooth animations. You'll learn how to build reusable elements like navbars and footers using components. We'll embed videos and maps, and even create custom code blocks with AI using Figma Make. Then we'll publish either with a free Figma URL or your own domain. I'll show you how to set it all up for accessibility and search engine optimization, so your site is polished and ready to go live. Want to push it a step further? Then I'll show you how to build your own design library with flexible colors, typography, and responsive blocks you can reuse across all your projects. Figma Sites is perfect for portfolios, product launches, and personal pages or small companies. A quick, easy way to get your idea online and focus on your product again. This is a course by moonlearning.io. To get your course material, make sure that you jump to Project and Resources, and then you see a link called Download the Course Material. Click on it. You'll get to the download page, and then here you'll see the thumbnail of the course you're currently taking. Simply click on Download. So there are two files to download. So one that ends in .site, that is the page where I show you everything that I'm building during the course, so you can just inspect it to your own liking and play with it. You don't need it, but it might be quite handy. And then the one up here, this is in the later part of the course where we're going to build our own library. So this is a library that you can connect. You can already download both of them now. So to access these files, you cannot simply double click them to open. You need to import them into Figma. And I'm going to run through the Figma interface in a second in more detail. So if you're new to this, then don't worry, we're going to cover it in more detail. In general, you need to go into your account, and then you need to go into your projects and then select a project. And inside you should find some sort of import button. It keeps changing around a little bit right now. If you go under Create, then you find your import button here, and you can then simply import the files that you downloaded. It doesn't matter if it's Sites file or Figma design files, you can store them all in the same project. The Figma file browser. Before we dive in, let's first have a look at the Figma working structure. This is especially important if you're new to Figma. When you open your account, it might look something like this. There might be slight differences, for example, if you're working in a browser, or also if you're working at another version or an update, then sometimes things move slightly around. However, in the core, you should find the same elements. So what you need is you need to find your team, and then inside of your team, you have something called projects. You can have more than one team in Figma, so you might be invited to some teams, you might have some paid teams for yourself, or you might have some free teams. If you click on the little arrow, then you can see all your teams and you can swap in between them. The team I'm in right now is a professional team. In order to use Figma Sites and libraries, for example, you do need a pro account or above at this moment of time. So inside of your team, you see the projects, and this term is a little confusing. So that's a naming that's from the very beginning of Figma, and they kept it. So that means that these are different projects. However, you could really use that for absolutely everything. Just see it as a layer of organization, really. Now you can see here I have two projects, and what we want to do, we want to create a new one for this new project where we're going to build our sites page now. So right now on the app, we have the little plus project button up here. And as I said, this keeps on changing all the time. To be honest, I would expect something around here, but we don't have a plus button here. So let's click on here, click on project, and now you can just name your project. So I'm going to name this Sites Demo. And then it's asks you if you want to invite other people. We don't need that for now, so just jump that. You can always invite later. And now you can see you have your new project. So if we click on all projects, you can see that it created the third one. And by the way, there's a little star button. So this is really handy. You can see if you star a project, then it's going to appear on this sideline so you can access it quicker. Double click either on here where you started or right on the project, and then you're inside where you can create files. So to create a file, we use the same button, and you can see it changed now. So if we click on plus or on the little downward arrow here, you can see that you have the choice between design files, FigJam, and so on. Now we want to go for a sites file. So click on this, and you're going to jump right into your sites file. You're going to be asked if you want to use templates. For now, let's click no. And if you want to jump back to your overview, then click on the little house button. Again, this might look a little different if you're in the browser, and then you're back on your main screen. And remember, you can access it by going into all of your projects, finding the projects you're in, and then right inside, you're going to see the file that you just created. You can rename your file either from inside of here or right from over here by right-clicking it and click rename. The Figma Sites interface. So this is what you see more or less when you're opening your file. Now let's zoom out a little bit. You can use Command and minus and Command and plus to zoom, or you can simply use your mouse keys. So these are our canvases. So this is our home, and you will always start off with a home. That's like basically the home page that's later going to open. And usually what it shows you will be a desktop and a mobile. This could also change over time. And I recommend that you click on the little plus button up here, and you also add a tablet. And actually, if you hit Shift and 2, then you get a really nice full view of this. So before we dive in designing, let's have a look at what's happening around here, like the options we have in this view. So on the left-hand side, you have your layers panel. So that means you see everything that's going on the canvas. So right now you can see we have one web page. You can add more. We're going to do that later. And you can see here the home and then the details. So we have these 3 breakpoints, and you can also see what's on them. Right now we have no content. Let's just add anything randomly. So for example, let's just add sort of just a circle here. And now you can see that this was added to all of them. So this was added to the desktop, the tablet, and let's say on the mobile, we could move it individually. And let's say we don't want this element on the mobile, we just want it on the desktop and the tablet. Now, if we hit delete, you can see that this would just be hidden because this is the same screen. So things would always be present everywhere, but you can show and hide them to your liking. If you take it off on the desktop, then it's going to be taken off on any other breakpoint. So later on, you're going to find the publish button here as well. We're going to learn in detail how to publish our page. It's super easy. Then over here, you have this one where with insert, you have blocks and you have libraries. So blocks, this is like sort of pre-made elements by Figma. So let's just grab a hero. And if you drop it on your desktop element, then you can see it's already set up for all of your other screen sizes as well. So this is really handy, and you can of course alter this to your liking. Then we also have libraries. We're going to learn how to connect our own library. So that's going to look like these blocks over here, but we will just make our own, and I'll show you how to make breakpoints and everything. Then over here you have a search, so you can search any element. Then we have our make. So this is really exciting. Here we can add code elements. Again, I'm going to show you all of these in details. And here you already get a preview. Figma is bringing a CMS right now at the moment of recording. This is still in progress, but I'm going to add this as soon as it's ready. And then over here we have some settings. So this is where you're going to set like favicons and preview and information about your page. Again, we're going to run through all of this. So per default, always have your file open. So at the bottom here, you have your tools. So you can either let's just pick some text. So you can just add the text here to your liking. And then as soon as you grab an element, so this could be text, or let's just add our circle here again. If you grab it, then on the right hand side, you can see the properties. So for example, you could change the text size, you could change the font and all of that, and colors, and any property of whatever element you grab over here. So the best way is just to go through here. So you have different shapes, you have drawing tools, you have images, you have text, and you also here you can add new pages. Again, we're going to do that separate and Make. We're going to explore that in a separate video. On the right-hand side panel, you don't only have the properties, like right next to the properties, you also see the interactions. So this is like you can add hover effects, connect pages, and again, we're going to run through all of this in more detail. So let's start with setting up our first page with Figma Sites. And the easiest way to get started and still have a lot of control over your layout is probably to use blocks. So click on the little plus sign and then you're going to see the preset Figma blocks. So there are preset pages, but we have better control over the layout if we're using the actual blocks. So you can see there's navigation, heroes, features. So let's start with a navigation, and let's just take any navigation and then just drag it over. And the important part is you only need to drag it onto the desktop version, and then it's going to create all the breakpoints for you automatically. That's like baked into those blocks already. Let's actually turn this into a little portfolio. So I'm going to go to Heroes. I'm just going to drag over a hero section. And then from Features, I'm going to add some text, something like this, describing my skills. Maybe a picture, like something about. And then what I also want in the very end is some sort of footer. So that should be navigation. I'm just going to take this very simple footer here. Now, what you can see is they're not in the exact order. For example, I want the footer further down. So you can simply just drag it, or you can also use your arrow keys, and then you can move those whole blocks around to your liking. And notice how I just need to change it in the desktop, and then all other breakpoints will follow. Now, anything I would delete in my desktop, for example, if I take rid of that whole block, that would happen to all the breakpoints. But note one little thing. So let's say I'm here, I'm having these buttons. And so let's just take the secondary. Let's say we're taking the secondary off. Now here you can see this is the desktop, and have a look what's happening here. If I take the secondary off, then this is going to completely disappear. So this is where you can really choose if an element should disappear entirely. But you could also say, I just want this button on my main desktop version, but for example on my tablet, for whatever reason I don't want this. If you would then hit delete, then it would simply hide it. And that's totally fine, just be aware of this. You could also hide entire sections. So let's say you don't want this section on desktop. It would look in the end like it's gone, but note how it will always be here in your layers panel. So before we alter the content, let's actually look what our page looks like in a dynamic setup. So what it will look like in the browser. There are different ways that you can get a preview. You can either click on this play button here, or you have the play button over here. With this little arrow, you can choose if you want inline preview or a whole page. So let's just click it, and then you're going to get an own preview. And see, that's really nice. There's some animation already set in here. So you can resize it, then you can see the different behavior, and you can also scroll through this really nicely. Now, if we go back here, what you can also do is you can use the shortcuts, and you get it if you forget it here. So Shift and space. And if I press Shift and space, then I get this handy in-file preview. So it's a little nicer to quickly work on this. When using the preset blocks, then Figma is really smart. And so if we click on here, you can see that it already set up the so-called auto layout for you. So it added a vertical layout. You can see that we see the full page. If you ever don't see the full page, then you need to go here in the height and make sure this is set to hug. And all our blocks are already set up to something called fill the container in the resizing. So to get started, that is great. So everything is set up and we're going to take it from there. Just be aware that later when we're adding elements or you're changing things, we need to understand this layout section a little better to have full control over our layout. But for our first simple example, everything is working the way we want it, so we can now add our content. And this is really quite simple. You just select the content on the desktop and then you change it to your liking, and this will be reflected on all breakpoints. So you can just go bit by bit and then just add the text to your liking. And for example, I want to get rid of these buttons. Actually, I don't need them, so let's get rid of this. Now, if we want to add our images, then we can simply select any frame or any shape, and then via the fill menu, you click on fill, upload from computer, and you can then select any image. There is a bulk import function in Figma, so you can press Shift, Command, and K, and then you can literally just select the images and then just drop them wherever you want. The only problem right now is that there is a little bug, so it doesn't add them to the breakpoints currently. I hope this will be solved by the time you're using this. For now, I'm just going to do this manually. So I'm just going to speed that up for you. Now, if you want to shuffle the elements around a little bit, you can also do this. Simply select the image, and then with the arrow key on your keyboard, you can move them. And again, you can see that this is reflected everywhere. And I just went ahead in the background and already updated all of this text here. You can completely do that to your liking. Another little thing that you might actually want to do is it looks a bit flat all in white. So you can just select certain blocks and then just click on the fill button in case you don't see a fill color. And then I'm just going to give it a slight tint of a really light gray, just for a little bit of depth. And just like this, if we're pressing our play button, you can see that you have a really lovely and working first web design ready in no time. And by the way, all of these lovely pictures I'm using are from Lumi.ai. You can find a lot of free images as well as upgrade to a pro plan and get fantastic AI generated images for your designs. So now let's add a subpage. So what I want to happen is I want to click on one of these portfolio images and then get some more information on a separate page. So what I need to do is I need to add that page. So we click on adding a web page. You can also do it up here. And then what you get is this sort of page. So we just have the desktop, but we need all the same breakpoints. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the plus button and we're going to add a tablet. And we want to add a mobile for full control. You can rename the page. So I'm just going to call this Cafe. So I'm going to start with my blocks again. And this time what I want is I want some features. So I want something that is sort of a lot of images, so something like this. So I'm going to drag this over again, drop it on the desktop, and then it's going to just duplicate it on all your breakpoints. And I also want a navigation, but I already changed the text in this navigation here a little bit for the contact me. So I'm going to use the same. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it on the desktop, pasted it down here. So I'm going to move it with my arrow keys up. And now I have the same navigation on all of them. And then maybe we just want to add, I don't know, a little bit of text or something like this. So down here, you can see there are some text fields. I'm not sure. I think this here will be all right. So we can add some more information if we wanted to. And of course, our footer, I'm going to use the same one here, and that copied just fine at the bottom. So now before we jump into the content, let's actually connect it right away. So in the right hand side property panel, you have design and you have interactions. Click on interactions and now select the element. So in this case, our picture that you want to connect. You have to deep click until you really got the picture. And then you see these little bubbles appearing. Any bubble, just keep it down with your mouse and then just connect it. And you're going to see that it connects from all the different breakpoints. And that's pretty much it. Now we want to connect back. So in this case, I would love a breadcrumb, but there isn't one in my block. So I'm going to use here the main logo to connect back. So this is maybe something that later I'm going to fix. So I'm going to connect both of these here and I'm going to select this and just connect back. Okay, so let's have a look if that is working. So I'm going to use my shortcut Shift and space bar. And so now you can see here, this is working really nicely. It's still responsive and everything working. And so if we now hover over this, we can see we can click it and then we get to our new page. And if we click on the logo, we get back. Okay, great. So all I'm going to do now, I'm going to add my content here. So jump back to design and I'm actually going to speed that up in the background for you. So let's just add the text I already wrote. And I already made a little bit of subtext here as well, which I'm going to copy. And again, remember, we always just copy in desktop. And now we just need to add our images. And I'm just going to speed that up a little bit for you here in the background. And here we go. So we have our page with subpages ready. Let's just play the whole thing so you can see lovely, all responsive. We jump to our subpage, which is also responsive, and we can always go back. So let's customize our design a little bit and add some of our own elements to this. So you can see over here, I have a large picture, which I want to add, because if I have a look right now in features, I don't really just get one large hero image. So what I do is I'm just going to drag this over. I'm going to drop it in here. And you can see that I can add it, but it doesn't behave the way that my preset blocks do. Now, if you want to add customized elements, then you need to know a little bit about layout. I'm just going to show you the basics, but I highly recommend that if you are not familiar with Figma's auto layout feature, that you jump into one of my other courses where I go through auto layout in Figma in depth. It's really a feature that's very worth knowing. If you're however just playing around a little bit with sites, you might even get away with just a few tricks that I show you. So first thing that we need to do, if you select this block, for example, you can see here that in the width, it is set automatically to something called fill the container. So that means it's going to take up all the available space. Right now, if we select our image, this is not set up to fill the container. You can see here in layout, if we drop this down, you can see that this has a fixed width. So just jump to fill the container. You can see also here we have this one set, which means that we're keeping the aspect ratio of this image. And now you can see that this fills the container everywhere. So don't do this. Let's just go back to what we had previously. You might be tempted to just resize this, but then what happens, it looks good in your static view, but if you then have a preview, you can see that this is actually not going to behave with your design anymore. If you want a fixed element, this is fine. Otherwise, make sure that you set this to fill the container. Now we can customize this a little further. You can see here that we have a corner radius of 16. So we can just grab our main image and we could also set this to a corner radius of 16. Now I added another element. So this is a little breadcrumb because remember, it's a bit strange that I have to click on the logo to go back. I want this to be more obvious on how to navigate this. So the thing is, right now, this is only a frame and I added some text. In Figma, every element we have, and in blocks they set this up for you, should be set up in auto layout to be working. Again, if you're a total beginner, this might be overwhelming and I highly recommend that you familiarize with auto layout. I'm just going to show you this quickly and assume that you understand a little bit of auto layout. So I'm selecting this and I'm going to hit Shift and A. So this created an auto layout. You can see this is happening here. So this is going into this direction. I can see the distance here. I'm going to make this a multiple of 8 actually. I can add some padding and so on. And now I'm also going to create the outer frame. I'm going to select this. And you can see here, this is a frame. So I can also select this here, or I can press Shift and A. This is my shortcut. And then I'm creating this auto layout. So now I'm just going to pull this out. So this is the size of my parent frame, 1280. And I can now, for example, add some padding here, top and bottom. So I'm just going to have the bottom one 24, the top one, I think 24 as well. And now the sides, I'm actually going to check what's happening here in my navigation. So my navigation is telling me 64. So I'm going to use 64 for left and right as well. If this is a bit overwhelming when you're new to Figma, you might also just get away with simple elements like this, just layouting them and putting them inside there. So what we're going to do now, we're going to drag this over here and I'm just going to drop it on here. And you can see it dropped it everywhere. Again, see how it doesn't resize properly because what we have to do, just as with the others, we have to select the entire element and then in the width, set this to fill the container. Now, there is a more structural way to set this up, but right now we're just doing this a bit manually for a one-off. So you can see here that we have different padding. So here we have a padding of 32. So I'm just going to do that on this element here as well. And then for the mobile, we have 24. And I'm also going to set this up 24. So here you go. So what I don't like is this huge distance here. Actually, one thing I want to do is I want this nice little gray background here as well. So I'm going to select this. You can click on the fill color. I'm going to take this little picker and I'm just going to pick the background color I have over here. So I have a nicer overview. So this is nice, but this is really large here, this distance. So I can also alter this here and I can just go down here a little bit and make this a little smaller. And if I wanted to, I can also use this and maybe add a little bit here so I have more room if I want this to be clicked. So all I need to do now is I'm going to select this home over here. I'm going to jump to interaction again. And I'm just going to make sure that when I click on this, this is jumping back home. So let's try this out. So here we have our design. We go to the subpage. This is looking lovely. Let's see if our image is resizing. Yes. And then if I click on home, I'm going back home. Let's add some external links to our design. So a mail link and connect our social media, for example. So what we have here is we have a button. So we want to click that button and then open an email. And then down here we have some social media. So let's do both of that. Let's start with our button. So I'm going to select the button, and this really works for any element. And then in the right-hand side properties panel, you see something called link. You see it in design and also in interaction. Sometimes it moves a little bit. Click on the plus button and then you get a field to add a URL. You can also connect it to any subpage that you created, for example. So if you have a page with a form that you want people to fill out. Right now what we just want it to be clicked and then open an email. And you can do that with mail too. So you don't add a URL. You could add a URL, for example, if you have an outside blog or something you want to send people to, but we're going to use mail too. Now you could open this in a new tab. In this case, it doesn't matter because it's going to open in a new one anyways. So let's try this out. So let's open our preview. Let's click on our button. And you can see that it opened my email program and it's sending it to the email address that I gave. It's using the same one here because this is my address I'm using for demo. So you'd find the address of the user sending it from in this field. When you're adding something like this, just make sure that you also have your email address in the footer or somewhere else in plain text. So anyone that does not have an email program installed on their device can still find your contact details. A little side note, you can also extend mail too. So instead of just opening a mail, what you can do is you can add some info. So there are different generators. You can, for example, use mail to linkgenerator.com or just search for any other. So here you add the address that you want to open, the mail where the mail should be sent to. You can add CC, BCC, you can add a title. So for example, you know that this is a request coming from your website when someone sends it. And then you can add a body. So you can add a preset email. This is super handy. For example, you're having sort of a request that you want people to be filled out, like what's your budget, what's your company, what's your position. Then you just click generate and it's going to give you the mail to link or the HTML code. We need the mail to link as we're working with links. And then instead of what we just had, I'm just gonna change this and paste the mail to I just copied. And let's now have a look what happens. So if I click on contact me, you can see that this entire page here was added. So you can see that we now have a subject, we have a CC, and we have this as a body. So it's not necessary, but it might be quite handy. So now let's also connect our social media. So down here in the footer, I have my social media. So I'm going to use LinkedIn as an example. So I'm going to select this whole frame here. So the one for the LinkedIn frame. And then I'm going to go the same way. I'm going to click on linked. And now I'm going to add an external link actually. So here I'm just going to take the link for my LinkedIn page and I'm just going to paste it into that field. So now if we're going to preview and we're clicking on this, it's going to open my LinkedIn page. Working with components. So component is a big subject in Figma. And again, if you're very new to this, jump to my beginner's course and I have a section where I explain all of this in a lot of detail. For now, I just want to show you some basic usage of components with sites. So for example, here we have our button and we use that all over the place. And also we have our navigation and we have our footer and we have also some behavior baked in there, which we would now have to copy into all of these buttons everywhere. So what we can do is we can turn this into a component. And a component basically means that you having like a mold that you're then reusing. So let's actually take this button out of here. And you can see it copied all of them. I just need one. And this is called primary button. That sounds great. And I'm simply going to turn it into a component by clicking on the little component sign over here. So our component should always live outside of our design, and we're going to organize it a little better as well later on. But what I want to do now, I just want to copy, and all of these copies are called instances, and I'll put them into my design. So I'm just going to drag out an instance, hold down Alt and Option. You can use copy and paste, by the way. I just find that a little more messy. So what I do, I hold down Option or Alt, and then I get an instance of this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this original button, and I'm just going to replace it with the button that I just made. Let's just be, if you can't manage to position it nicely here, use your layers panel. We have a little button group here. So I'm going to add it in there. Let me just position it on the other side. So now I have the same button in my navigation that I have over here. So if I change anything, for example, this link behavior, or let's just randomly change the color, you can see that this is reflected everywhere in our design now. However, I am also using this navigation in several places. So I use it here and I use it over there. So I can also turn this entire navigation with the nested instance of the button into a component. So let's pull this out. And then I'm going to do the same. I'm going to turn this into a component. This is called header 2. Just going to leave that now. And I now can create an instance and then I can replace this. So let's get rid of this. And now I'm creating an, oh, sorry, I already created one. I'm using this instance here and I'm just going to drag it in there. What, however, happened now is that this instance, you can see I'm using the same one over there. So I could manually change that. I could overwrite it, but that wouldn't be clean because I would overwrite and then I would lose all the information I put in here. So it gets a little unclean. But as you can see, what originally happened already is that when I pulled this out, you can see that it actually gave me all of these three, or I could create them by hand. And now we can create something called a component set with this. So let's actually just give that a bit of a background color so we can work with it better. We can take that off later on. So you can see I already have all of these three versions that I need, or you could set them up by hand, for example, with a breadcrumb or just anything that you adding here. You could also manually set this up, but I'm going to use what Figma already gives me. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all of those into a component. And now I'm just going to change the naming a little bit. So I'm just going to have all of them called header, or actually going to call all of them navigation. So now I'm going to select all three. And then you can see over here, it's telling you combine as variants. Click that, and then you're going to see a little purple outline that Figma is going to turn around them. So what you see now, let's just pull out an instance of this. And now you can see I have the instance, but it's telling me there's an error. It says there's a property, but they're all named the same. So what we need to do, we select each of them, and then I'm going to call this one desktop. And this is important. It's going to work really nicely if you use desktop, tablet, and mobile. Otherwise, properties in Figma Design, you can name them anything. But here we stick to this naming. Then I take the tablet, I call it tablet, and the mobile. Now I could also change that property name. You don't have to, it will work anyways, but I could just call this breakpoint. Okay, great. And now if I select the instance, you can see that it now has in-baked all of these different versions. And what I can do now, I'm just going to get rid of this and I'm going to drag it on here. And it's now going to know where to position which one, simply by having used that name. This is something that Figma set up for you in the background. And the great thing is now I can just use that same navigation here. So I'm going to pull out an instance and add it here. And now I also have my navigation. And so anything that I change now with the button, with the setup, let's say that we're turning around like the order of this. Say that we're selecting this button and we're moving it. You can see that this will be reflected everywhere and now only in the desktop. So I can also make conscious decisions like the padding, like the margins in these different breakpoints. So in the background, all of these blocks that you're seeing that so magically worked across the breakpoints, like in the background in Figma, they're all set up in this way. This is why it works. Which also means that we can set up our entirely own block library, and we're going to do that a little later on. For now, we're just going to leave our components here. If you've worked with Figma Design, then you will know that usually you do not want your components on the same page as your design. But right now, Figma is not really giving us much options in this beta version that I'm working with. What you can do to add a little bit of organization is go down here, and here you find sections, or you can use Shift and S, and then you can draw a section around here, and you can simply call this components. You could also organize this further, so you could have navigation elements and so on. But later on, I'm going to show you a better way to set up a library and keeping all of this nice and organized. If you just have a few bits and bobs here and there, then this is just going to be fine to get you started. And just to get the hang of it, let's actually do the same with our navigation. So I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to place it on here right now. I'm going to give it a little bit of background color. Again, you can take this off later on if it bothers you, just so we see it better. And let's do this really quickly. There's actually also a shortcut to do this. So what I am doing is I'm selecting all of them. I could either create components for each of them and then combine it, or you can use a shortcut. So there's a little arrow next to your component sign, and then you can see create component set from here. So you can also use this. Again, it's going to tell you there's an error with the naming. So we sort out the naming. I'm just going to speed this up, but remember it's desktop, tablet and mobile. And if you want, you can click on the entire component name and also rename the property, for example, to breakpoint. And now we can simply pull out an instance and we're going to add it again to our design. You can add it anywhere, and then remember you can just move it with the arrow keys. Got stuck a little bit, apparently not. Let's add it to the end. And you can also copy it just from any design to another. So we could just get rid of it here and then copy this one back in. Again, you have to make sure you position it like in this little, when it shows you this little line, and then you can move it further. And here you go. So now anything you add here, for example, you just need to add your social media links once, or you can also change this primary button. So just be careful with one thing. I now have a general button and I only use this contact button, but you might use a button for different things. In that case, you might have to create a separate button. So where you have one button for contact button and then just a general button that you link within the document. Just be a bit mindful of that. Now, during this course, I'm going to refer to a lot of Figma features like components, auto layout, and variables. If you're used to Figma, then this will be all very natural to you. However, if you're new to Figma, then this might be a little overwhelming. I'll not cover these concepts in this course. However, with your Skillshare membership, you can jump into my Figma beginners course. So in projects and resources, I added a direct link. You can just click on that. Now this will lead you directly to this course. The course is 4 hours long and it starts with all the basics, which you might or might not want to go through. If you only want to look into certain concepts like components or variables, for example, the difference between variables and styles, something very important for typography, then you can just jump to these sections and I explain all of that from the beginning. Also auto layout, as you can see here. If you want to go the extra mile, then you can find more things in this course, like how to prototype with Figma, how to collaborate, and there's even a course project for your portfolio. This is also by far my most popular course on Skillshare, and as you can see in the reviews, people have been very happy about it. So jump in and learn more about Figma. Let's set up a fixed navigation bar. So in our design here, if we have a preview, we can see we have a navigation bar, but if we scroll, it disappears. You might want this, but probably in a lot of the cases, you just want this to stay right fixed at the top. So this is really easy. All you need to do is select your navigation. And this could be an instance of a component, this could be from blocks, this could be anything you designed yourself. It doesn't matter. The important part is that have a look that it's a direct child of your main frame. So sometimes you might have by accident packaged it inside of here. This looks the same, but it might block that you can set it to fix. So just make sure in your layers panel that this is on its own level, and then select it, and on the right hand side in position, this used to be in interactions, right now they have it in position, so it might slightly move. So look for something called position or scroll, and then choose fixed behavior. So you're going to see this little outline here. So that means it was taken out of the standard behavior. So it doesn't go with the flow, which is also why your content moved up, because your content moves up when it's set to auto layout. So let's just grab this to understand it. So this is aligned here at the top. So it's just going to start from the very top. So if you want this natural little gap, so for example, here you'll see it's very necessary, then have a look. So this is around 95 in height. Your navigation, you can see that here in your height settings. And then what you do is just grab the desktop. So it's gonna add this to everything. And then in your auto layout settings, you can see here the padding, and then you can just add this padding again to the top. And this way, this is just gonna push down. You could also alter this a little bit to your liking. And you might also see solutions where this is actually using sort of a fake background here. So sometimes people just make a little frame and put it on the top of it. It also works, but I think this is the cleaner solution. So let's have a look in preview. And if we scroll through it, then that looks just fine. However, if we resize, note one thing, how this is jumping. So we need to go back and fix one little detail. So select the header, because right now, remember, we always set all of this to fill, and suddenly we don't have this available anymore, because fill the container, that is an auto layout setting. And because we took this out of auto layout and set it to fixed, we don't have the auto layout rules anymore. But what we can use is this up here. We can use the constraints. So in your constraints panel, look for something called left and right. So that's just going to keep it there. So right now, if we click again on the preview and we resize it now, you can see that now it is keeping the distance nicely. Let's add some animations to our design. So actually, if we go to preview, we can see that these little thumbnails, they're already animated by themselves, and this is sort of baked into that block. So let's go back and let's understand how that actually works. So for animations, jump over to the interactions panel. So right next to design, you find interactions. We already added interactions, so that means when we're going from one page to another or to an external link. But if we select elements on our canvas, then we get more options in that menu. And for example, let's select this card group where we already have something set. So this nice little circulating animation. And you can see that this was set up here in interactions. So there is an animation that's built in, and it's called marquee. I could just click on minus, so I could take off the interaction, and then I just have a static picture here. So any element we select, we could add some interactions. Now it's nice to add them when they make sense, but rather use less than more. Please don't have these things where things are flying in and out. It's always a potential source of error, and it's always a bit confusing. So use it, but be mindful about it. But let's give it a try. So we have our hero text here, and then we have interactions. So let's click on the plus, and then we see our preset interactions menu. So you can see here we have things like scroll behavior, but the important part that we like for this is actually this here. So for example, if I want this typography to sort of be appearing, then what I could use is this one. I could use that typewriter, and then I could set the speed. I'm actually going to leave that at moderate, and I could loop it. Actually, I don't want this, and I have a little cursor. So let's have a look what that looks like. And you can see that this is really nice. So this is going to start typing as soon as I click on it, as soon as I open this page, basically. Now let's add a little bit more here and also understand that it depends on the layer that I'm choosing on what is happening. So let's add another effect, because you can actually, even though we already have the marquee effect, you can add more. So let's say we want a bit of a hover effect. And it's actually grayed out, and this is because I already added a hover effect. So you can have multiple effects, but not the same effect twice. So let me take this off so I can show you from scratch. And I'm just going to select this again. So now I have a hover effect, and you can see I have this here and I can set it. So I'm going to set this to 1.2 scale. So that means if I hover over it, then it's going to sort of like just pop up a little bit. So let's have a look and note how I set this on the entire card group. So let's have a look. So I can scroll, and as soon as I go over it, it goes bigger. So I might want this, but I actually want to just hover over a card and just have this on the single card. So make sure you take it out of here. And now I select the card group, I hit enter. This is a fast way to access all the child elements. You could also just select them one by one. And then what I do, I add an interaction and I add the hover effect, and I do the same now, 1.2 or actually maybe 1.1 to keep it a little subtle. And let's have a look now. So I'm playing this, and as I hover, you can see I get this nice little smooth hover effect. I might want to adjust the distance a little bit. So I could now just select this, jump back to design. And then here I actually have the gap. So I could like widen this gap a little bit and give it a little more space to grow. Quite a nice one and very subtle is also a reveal. So let's say we want to reveal these elements as we scroll. I'm going to actually leave this as it is. And then I'm going to select these two. And so I'm going to add interaction and reveal. And then so as soon as it is in view, you can also do page load. But I'm going to do as soon as I sort of scroll onto it, it's going to fade in. So this is really subtle. Let's have a look. So if I scroll, notice how this slightly comes visible. So it's almost, you almost don't notice. Let me actually give you this one. And instead of fade in, let's say this one comes from the left. And then let's have this one come from the right. So we see it a little better. And now let's have a look at it again. Let's use the full view. And you can see that it really slowly just slides in. You also have some crazy ones here. Let's just select them just for the fun of it. So here, for example, if we go onto play and then we have draggable and we just say you can drag anywhere. And then you can see now we can just drag those elements around. Not sure how useful that is, but really just play with them and see what might be useful for you. Be mindful with animations, but use them where they make sense. Embeds. So one part of our blocks, so if you click on the plus button, you see the blocks, then right here at the end, I currently have the embeds. So I'm recording this while it's still in beta, so it might be a little limited, and I hope that you see better adaptability. But I just want to show you what's possible for now. So we have right now 3 URL, YouTube and Google Maps. So URL, if I add this, you can see that this is really only, you can add a URL or an HTML code. So the ones that you're probably more interested in is our YouTube one. So let's add this one and a Google Maps one. So if you select them, you already see that they have fewer properties in the properties panel. But what you can do is you can't simply drop them right now, but you can copy them. And then, for example, you can select this hero and you can add it in here. So you could also sort of have it inside of any of your other blocks or layout as an element. So it might have a fewer options, but you can still position it relatively well. So now we want to add a video here and we want to add a map here. So what we need, if we select this, you can see that up here we need a URL or some HTML. So with YouTube, we can simply paste our YouTube URL in here. So I'm just going to grab one from my videos. So this is on my YouTube channel. So if you want to use your own videos, you need to upload them on your own channel first. But you could also just embed any other YouTube video. Find the share button, and then via the share button, you simply copy the share link. And now we're just going to paste it inside of here. And you can see Now your thumbnail is already here. You can choose whether you want autoplay, you want full screen enabled so people can enlarge it. And right now, I actually have to say there's one little thing that I hope is going to be solved soon, that the thumbnail, the dimensions are not correct for YouTube. So you can unclick the aspect ratio lock and then you can just like set it up to the right dimensions. You can also just get them from YouTube if you want. I'm just going to do that manually for now so it looks fine. And then here we have our map, and you can see that we have a URL or some HTML, so we can get URL or actually just the iframe. So I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to jump over to Google Maps. And so I just searched for Berlin now. And so all I do is I'm going to get the share location for Berlin. You can also add a specific street with a house number, and I'm just going to copy the link. Actually, no, I want the embed map. So I click on embed and you can see here, this is an iframe, and I'm going to copy this iframe. So now let's jump back to our Figma file and I'm going to paste that right in here. And now if we click on our preview, you can see that we have this video. So we can play this here. With Moonplugs and Figma Sites, you can now. And you can also scroll down and then you have your map, which you can use just as you would Google Maps. So actually in your feature blocks, if you want to use that map with an address, then you also find one here. So you can just replace that block. So basically you can just use this one and you could now simply add all that information just as we did before. Actually, we should still have it saved. So you can see here, if I now paste this inside of here and let's play this again. So you now see if you scroll the block, you can add the information and you see the integrated map. Figma Make and code layers. So there's a great feature we haven't explored yet, and that is Figma Make, which brings code inside of our page. And we can literally create these little blocks with code. So there's currently, at this version, this is still the beta version, 2 places where you find it. So you find it over here in the bar, and here you can see it opens a complete page, so you can also just create an own page with Figma Make. What I want to show you is this part here where we use it as code layers. So you can see it's in this little embed or make field we currently have. So just click on it and it's going to open the interface. And so you see this little code layer here, and we can place it on our design. And then we're getting this window with the code layer. And now it's pretty straightforward. So all you have to do is, it's an AI tool and you're describing the idea that you'd like to build. So this could really be anything. And you can see it's giving us some ideas here, like a gradient background, a digital clock. So let's actually just go for the digital clock, and then you can see a prompt, what it would look like. So you can see here. And now if we click on this button, it's going to generate this code for us. So this might take a while, so I'm going to speed that up in the background for you. And now you can see the code layer was generated. Note how we can see our layers. So it was generated for each breakpoint. Looks like this. It's giving us some options that we can alter this, sort of the most important parameters. You can see your code here. And you can see also usually side by side. And then you can have your chat here. So you could also tell it to make any changes. But let's just use it for now. So if we close this, we can see it in here. So we can move it around. And you can see, as usual, we probably have to set this up in auto layout and position this a little bit. But we basically have this little block here. So if we press preview, then you can see that this is a working clock, which we can now, just as any other element, position here and integrate into our design. So up here, you can see that we can also edit the code. So you can jump in back here. And then what I really like is this little part here, which is point and edit. So for example, I can use this and now I can point at different areas in my design. So I can select this, so I could change the color here. So this is all sort of design things, but you can also have a chat with your code layer and then tell it what to do. So let's try this out and let's try if it could give us a AM and PM version instead of this sort of clock. And as usually, it's an AI tool, so you never really know what's going to happen. So you might have to play around a little bit. So again, this is going to take a little while in the background. I'm going to speed that up for you. And so you can see it changed this for us. Now let's try something else. So the page that we're building is for a freelancer. So what I want to do, I want to have this calculator, so I can add my prices there, and then people can calculate sort of a first estimate of how much my services would be and then reach out to me. So at this moment of time, what I still like doing is I just describe in ChatGPT or Claude what I like and then ask it to write a proper prompt for me. So this just makes your prompt a little clearer. So I gave it a vague idea. I want an estimate calculator for UI designer's website. So potential customers, they can select from a basic, standard and premium price. And then I want something for logo, typography, image style, and a landing page. And then they see the total. So I wanted to create a prompt, and then let's just use that prompt. So usually I'd work a little bit and customize this first one, but I'm just going to copy it like this. And now we're jumping over to Make, and we paste it there. You don't have to do that. You can also just write it in here and then play with it. But I just find it gives me better results. But again, there is absolutely no need to pre-factor the prompt if you just prefer writing it yourself. So again, I'm going to speed this up in the background for you. And that looks quite nice. So let's close it and let's have a look on our proper page. I'm just going to, as usual, set up the auto layout, hit enter. You can really use this like you use any other layer. So fill the container, and let's now see it in action. So we can see now we can select any other price. Very lovely. And then down here, actually we have to jump back because we have to set this one, remember, to hug the content. So we see the full one. Oh, that's not working. So just set the make layer to hug content as well. And now you should be able to see it. So let's go back. Now we can scroll down, and then you can see as I'm changing this, this is automatically gonna update my content. So really, really lovely. And this is, of course, fully responsive right away. Now you can always go back. You can select the code layer. You can jump back into edit, and then you can make any changes here. So let's publish your site. And this is really, really easy. So once you're happy, then simply click on publish. And then what's going to happen is Figma is going to give you some random number or word, and then it's .figma.site, and that is a free URL you can use for now. You can later connect your custom domain, but for now, let's use this one. Then simply hit publish. And once you see the update, you can simply click on that link, and then you're going to see your real website live. It's fully responsive, and you can always go back and simply update and push to your live site. So our page looks fine, but there is some additional information we should add. So a bit of information about the page, maybe we want a little favicon, that's that thing in the header. So let's actually click here on our settings, and then we can have general settings and we have domain settings. So here you can connect your domain and control it further if you're doing this, but then in general, you can also add some information about the page. So you have your title, so that's what's written in a tab. It's not the best title here, but we're going to leave that for this. And then we have a site description. So this is, for example, if you copy it somewhere, they see it, or search engines. So here you would want to add a description. For example, this is my portfolio. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab this first part here and I'm going to add it. Actually, good idea is if you're using Claude or ChatGPT to ask it help you write these descriptions and fill out all of this. And then you can tell it use search engine optimization. The language, in my case, this is English, so I'm going to leave that. Google Analytics, this is really handy. So if you want to see who clicks, who's visiting your page, like you don't see which person, but you see like from which countries, demographics, so you get a bit of an overview, then you can set up an analytics account and they're going to give you this source of code and you can just copy it in there and it's going to track it. Then you can exclude website from search engine results. I'm going to keep it like this because this is just a demo page. But obviously, if this is your page, you definitely want to have this unclicked. So you want to make sure that search engines can find you. Now here we have a favicon. So that's that little thing in the header, that little icon that you see, and then social sharing image. So let's set up those two. So favicon 48 by 48 and social sharing 1200 by 630. So let's jump over and we can do that actually right here. So let's set up our favicon. So that was 48 by 48. So we need a frame. You can either click here and just get the frame, or hit F. And then let's just draw a frame and make sure the dimensions are 48 by 48. So that's going to be quite small. So yeah, so the favicon is that little header you later have up here in your website. There is like this little icon. So I'm just going to randomly create something with the colors from my page. So I'm going to speed this up for you. So yeah, this is just some random idea I had, which I think goes well with my design. I'm going to name this favicon. So you could either export the favicon and then import it again, or actually, this is much easier. Simply jump over here and then go into your favicon settings. And here you can see we call it favicon, and you can simply select it. And then this is going to show up. So let me show you. Let's publish again. And let's visit our page. And now you can see up here we have our little favicon showing up. Actually, I am loving my favicon so much that I'm just going to turn this into a logo. Just without the background, to not have it as prominent. So let's move this up here. I'm actually going to turn this into a component. And now I'm just going to replace all of this with my new logo. Little tip, what you can do to do it across all of your group is select it, and then up here you have a multi-edit, so you can get rid of all of that. And then we can select this one as well. And now we're pulling out an instance, and we're adding that instance here, and that we have to do on each of them by themselves. And I'm going to do the same for my footer. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this one as well. And I'm just going to add this here. Okay, great. So here you can have a look. Because this is components, this added my logo everywhere. So let's, now that we have the page the way we wanted, let's set up our preview image. So let me jump over here, and you can see it's 1200, 630. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to hit F and draw a frame that size. So 1200 times 630. And then you can add anything that you want as a preview. You can completely make this up to your liking. I'm just going to go the easy way, and I'm just going to copy a preview of this up here. So there is a little trick what you can do to copy this so you don't have to export and import. Hit Shift, Command, and C, and this should copy a PNG for you. So you're going to see a little alert copied as a PNG. Then select the frame where you want to paste it, and just hit Command and V. So just a normal pasting. And now you're going to have like a picture of whatever you grabbed up here. Oh, the little problem I had is this grabbed like all of this. So I don't want this. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to take a screenshot for now. So let me grab that from my computer. I'm just going to paste it here. And then this is my little preview image. And again, you can completely customize this to your liking. So I'm just going to give it a dark background. And I'm going to call this preview. Jump back to your settings. And then as usual, you can just simply grab this from here. And so now anywhere that you're going to share this on your socials, this is going to show up. You can also add more code. So if you're familiar with CSS, here you have the option to add custom body, header, and head code, whatever you want to add in here. But this is the basic settings that you will need. So let's connect a custom domain. So you need to buy this domain first with any provider. I bought mine with GoDaddy, so I'm going to show you this, but you can use any other provider as well. So in Figma Sites, go to Publish, and then you can connect a domain. You're going to be in Settings, so you also see it here, and click on Connect Domain again, and then just type in the domain that you bought with your preferred provider. Once you've done that, click Save. At the bottom, you're now seeing the so-called DNS settings. So we need to add them with our provider. That sounds a bit tricky, but it's actually not that hard. Account where you bought your domain, and then you need to search for the DNS settings. If you've ever trouble locating this, then usually there is some contact for customer support that you can ask. So here you see your DNS records, and we're just going to add the ones that were told. So you don't need to understand much about it. You just need to add a CNAME record and a text record. And you can just copy the info right from Figma. So now we go in here, and then you're going to find a button where you can add a record. From the drop down, you have the type of record you can add. So here we're going to go for the CNAME, and then we're simply going to paste the information that Figma gave us. And now save it, and it's going to be added. And now you can see we're actually getting an error that this already exists. So we have to check here, and then we can see we already have a CNAME of that. And so basically what a CNAME does is simply just points to a direction. So we're going to change that moon blocks that we had here by default for our new one. And then you might be asked to verify that you're the actual owner. And then we're just going to add our text record. In this case, it's just a ownership verification. And so you can see there are some already. So let's just add ours in any case, and then we can deal with any errors later. So I'm just going to assume you don't understand much about DNS records. In that case, just copy it in there, and then we're going to check what's happening. So let's copy this one as well. And then we're just going to be asked probably to verify this again if we save it. So go ahead and just verify that you're the owner. And when we jump back to Figma, we can see that CNAME is working, but there seems to be something off with the DNS records. It could be a time delay. Let's try this again. But instead of just waiting, I'm going to verify. And what I like doing is using an LLM for that. So I have no idea about these records. I'm just going to take a screenshot about the ones that show me an error. And I'm also going to take a screenshot of what Figma gives me. And then I'm simply going to drop this into the LLM of your liking. I'm using ChatGPT, but you can use any other LLM as well. So I'm just going to drop those images inside of my LLM, in my case ChatGPT, and then I'm just going to ask it as I would with any client service or developer around. So I'm telling it that I'm trying to connect Figma Sites to my GoDaddy domain, and you would add the provider that you're using. And then I'm asking you to please have a look, because what I'm a bit confused about, not knowing about DNS records, is do I actually need those 2 records? Do I need to delete anything? And so I'm just going to ask it to give me a bit of help with this. And stuff like this works super well because this is literally technical info. So it's telling me the CNAME, as we already saw in Figma, that's working fine. And then it's telling me here there is a problem. So it is actually showing me that it's set to an hour. So that's generally fine. I might be a little bit patient. And then what else is it telling me? You do not need to delete either of them. So both are fine. And then to wait a little bit and to refresh. So I'm not very patient, so the only thing I'm just going to change, because everything else seems fine, I'm just going to change this to half an hour, wait a little bit, and then refresh. And my patience was rewarded. Now I can see everything is connected. So we can click on the actual link, and then we can now see our full working site. So yes, everything pretty straightforward. And if you have problems, then use your LLMs. It works wonders. A little side note, this should be working, but sometimes you can only access the page if you put www and not just the name. So in that case, you have to forward it. Excuse this is in German, but you need to find your forward, choose HTTPS, and then you need to forward to the www, and then it's always going to work, whether they put the 3 W's or they just put the name. And then save it, and it should now be working fine. Accessibility settings. So in this video, I'm going to give you a little overview of the current accessibility settings that we have in Figma Sites. They'll probably also evolve over time. Just be aware that accessibility actually in a lot of countries is a legal requirement that you need to fulfill. And there are different rules for different countries. So it's your responsibility to look that up by yourself. And if in doubt, consult a lawyer and make sure that you're aware of what you need to deliver. So this is not legal advice I'm giving you. I'm just running you through the settings that we currently have available. So let's start with our text. So on each page, we usually have a main headline, and that is called the so-called H1. So the first headline. Now select this headline, and you can see down here in the right hand side property panel, you can see there is an accessibility window, and because we selected typography, we get the typography tags. Now P, that is just any standard copy text. So for example, this one here, this should be set as a P. Let's have a look, and that is correct. Now this is our main headline, H1. So we want to change that to our H1, and be aware there is always just one H1 per page. You can have more H2, H3, but there should be just one H1. Now note how I am personally not calling my styles H1, H2, H3 and so on, which you will see a lot because of the reason which you're going to see here right away. So I have a display headline and I have other headlines. So this is the style, this is my visual hierarchy. And this here, the tags, that is my hierarchy when someone with a screen reader is reading this. So on our subpage, for example, I am not using this display headline, but this is still an H1 because this is still the main headline. So I still want to use this here. Just a little side note, there are different approaches to this. I am a strong advocate of decoupling your CSS tags from your style names. So really think about how someone would read this. So this would probably be the main one. Then this would be probably our H2, or maybe we have a headline here. This could also be an H3. And just like this, I would run through this. So these ones here are probably the least important headlines. So I would turn them into an H4. And here you can see you can have multiple H4s, but you only have one H1. And then any copy text, that is usually already set to P, and we can just leave it there. Now you might have noticed that when you're publishing, there are errors shown. So if you have issues, Figma actually helps you to solve them. So far we ignored them, but let's have a look because they should all be solved on your final page. So here it is telling us that, so let's actually start with this one here, there's a missing label. So that means we have an image that doesn't have a label. Let's click here and then we're going to jump to that image. And actually we would need to add that really to all our images. So what we need to do is whenever we use an image, then we need to add a name, so a description, a so-called alt tag. So we go on here, we click on plus, and then we have a label. And now we're going to describe what we see on here. So anyone using a screen reader would now be able to understand what's happening here. So in case that they cannot see those images. And we really need to do that for all of them. If you have a decorative image, then you can press this little button. So sometimes you might just have something in between, which is like a background or a placeholder or something. Then you can really just click on here and that will disable the alt. But also here, for example, if you have your profile picture, just make sure that you add an image and that you write a description. So here where you would write your name. And this really needs to happen for all images that you're using. Another important part to add to your CSS via these settings is the general structure. Again, for have better reading, and this is also going to improve your search engine optimization, by the way. So for example here, select this and then in the tags, you can see this section. This is already marked as a header. So we should have a header and then we should also tell it that the footer is the footer. So you can see because this was stored probably as a footer block, this already picked up, but otherwise you should do this by hand. But let's actually run through those main tags 1 second. So a div, that is a general container, so no semantic meaning. Then you have an article, that's a self-contained piece of content that could stand alone, like for example a blog post. Then a site, that means content related to the main content, like a sidebar or a note. Then we have a button, quite obvious, so an interactive element that performs an action while clicked. We have a figure. So that's to use to wrap media like an image or a chart with an optional caption. Then we have the footer that defines the footer section of the page. So that's quite straightforward. Then we have our header that marks the top section of the page or the section usually with titles or navigation. We have our main, so that represents the main content of the page, excluding repeated elements like a nav bar or footer. And then we have a nav that contains the navigation links for the site sections. And then we have sections, so that's semantically a grouped section or content, like a chapter of the page. So for example, our about part here, this could be a section. And then we have this here as our header, and then we could go a little further and we could, for example, say, actually, we could tag this right up here in our component, if we're using component, if not, just add it on the page. So this is our header, and then this here, that will be our nav. You can see this is already set up. And then our button, this should be registered as a button. And here you can see this, for example, didn't pick it up. So we can actually do that right here on the button. And now if we select it in here, because it is nested, you can see that this also picked it up. So it's a good idea to set all of this up in your component if you're using them, and for any other elements right on your page. So accessibility is much more than adding a little bit of color contrast and a little bit of tags here and there, but you can already do quite a good job as a designer. As said, this does not take out that you need to familiarize with the general rules of your country, but there is quite some great tools currently only in Figma Design and not in Sites. I hope we see them in Sites plugins soon. So if you're in Figma Design, then go to your plugins via the Actions panel. There are different ones. There's one called Idea. There's one called Stark. So I'm just going to show you Stark. You can also just Google for accessibility plugins and try out different ones. And so this is really great because this comes with a contrast checker. So for example, we could check that the text colors we have, can we actually use them on what different background? So for example, this text you could not be using on this one, but you could, for example, be using this dark text color on any of the light ones. So you see which one passes, there is more information. And there are other subjects like typography, touch targets, vision. Again, you get all text, focus, headings. So you have all of this inside of here to dive a little bit deeper. Setting up your own sites library with colors, typography, hierarchy, and your own component blocks. So how does this work? Well, basically what you can do is, as you've been using Figma blocks, you can build your own blocks. So you can set up an entire library. So that means you could set up your typography completely to your liking. So what font you're using, how you want all of this to behave across different breakpoints, and a general idea of the hierarchy. So what sort of dynamic you want here. The same for your colors. You can set up color variables and you can then use them across all of your designs, and you can easily update them. And you can set up your own blocks, so they're fully customizable components that are set up for different breakpoints. You could set up blocks, but you can also set up entire pages and create templates for any Figma Sites page to consume. You can then publish this entire file as a library, and that means that you can simply place it into your team, and then you can create any sites file or use any existing sites file, and via the library button you can simply access this external library. You can now pull in all the blocks that you created with all the right settings. You can of course fully customize this, add images, change text, and any change you do in the library is going to be reflected here as well. You can simply publish it as you would do with any other site you made in Sites. And this way you can create your fully responsive page with your own components. Let's import our Figma Moonblocks file, turn it into a library and connect it with Figma Sites. So the first thing you need to do, jump into your Figma account and then into any team, but it needs to be a professional team or above. I created a new project here. I'm going to jump in here. And instead of creating a new file, what I do, I use the same button, but I go to Import. And by the way, in Figma, the interface changes quite a bit, so you might find this in a slightly different place. The important part is that you use Import, and you're now going to import the Figma file which you previously downloaded. This might just take a moment. It's quite a big file, so give it some time. I'm going to speed this up here. So once you're done, double click the file, and then inside of here you can see all the preset elements. So you're going to have colors, typography, and some elements already set up. Now you don't need to do anything. We can consume as it is all of these elements right in Sites. The only thing you need to do is you turn this file into a library so you can connect it. So jump to Assets over here. So right next to File, you see the little Assets tab, and here you see the library symbol. Click on this symbol and then click on Publish. Again, this might take just a moment as this is a little larger, so I'm going to speed this up in the background. Once this is done, let's jump back to our theme, and you can use an existing Sites file, or I'm just going to create a new one. So I click the button again and I go to Sites, important, not a design file, but you need a Figma Sites file. And we can jump this because we want to start from scratch. So let's zoom out a little bit, and you can see that it's already going to give us the home page. And there is a desktop version and a mobile, but in the file that you have, we always have a version, everything, desktop, tablet, and mobile. So we want the same in our Sites file. Simply click on the plus button, and then you see this one here. This is already set up in exactly the same sizes, and we now have the exact same setup as in our file. So now we want to connect our library. So click on this little button here and then jump to Libraries. There is blocks, but you want libraries. And click Browse Theme Libraries, and you should now find your library, if not just search by name. Once you found it, I have two here because I have this installed previously, so this is the one I just added. You will only see one. Just click on Add to Files. And you can now see your library over here in Library. So even if you go out of here, this is where you find it all the time. Now click on it, and then you're going to see three sections. The building blocks. So this is all the little blocks, hero, navigation, or you can also have designs. So here I made some ready-made designs for you, or wireframes. If you jump back to the file, so the original file which you turned into a library, then you can see here, if you go away from assets into files, that you have 3 pages. So the building blocks, which you see per default, the wireframes, so this is where you find all the wireframes, and the designs. So this is an exact mirror of this. And so all you need to do is you can either choose the pre-made blocks. So you simply select one of them and you only need to drag it on the desktop version, and then it's going to set up the other breakpoints for you as well. Or you can also use the ready-made pages, and the same here. Simply choose any of them, place it only on the desktop version, and it's going to set up all the other ones for you automatically. Let's set up our first page and also add some basic auto layout settings, because what was baked into Figma blocks you need to set up here by hand. So we have our page set up, but it's still a bit off because the thing is we can't see the whole thing. And if we press on preview, so this is this button here, or you can also use this one, it's the same. Then what happens is we do see the preview, but we can't scroll properly. And also if we resize it, I don't know, it's just a little off, right? It doesn't behave the way we expect it to. So let's jump back and set this up. So this is a few auto layout changes you need to do. And if you're new to Figma, that's the only part that might be slightly confusing. So just really follow me along here step by step and you should be fine. So grab the desktop. You only need to set it on the desktop and it's going to set it for all the rest. So what we need to do is we need to change this from a free flow to a vertical layout. So let's do this. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to align this to the center and the top. And then make sure that all of this is set to 0. So if you have some numbers in here, change it to 0. In order to see the entire page, we want to set the height not to a fixed value, but to hug the content. So that already looks quite good. Let's have a little look at the preview. So we can now scroll. But you still see that when we're resizing, it's now in the center, but we're still getting these little gaps we don't want because we want this to be very fluid. So we need to do one last little thing. So again, grab the desktop part and then hit enter. And that's going to grab all the child elements and you need to set them to fill the container. So in dimensions, don't take this one out, just use the little arrow and then choose fill the container. And so if we're checking this again, then you can now see that now it is working really nicely. And we can now alter all the content to our liking. So if you change the text in the desktop, that's just going to reflect on all other areas. You can also change the images, of course. Simply select the image and then via the image fill, you can choose any other image from your computer. Now the pages are ready set up for you, so maybe you do want a little bit of a more flexible setup. You could also use the different building blocks then. So let's create another page. So I'm going to go on web page down here. I'm going to place this right next to it. And I'm going to call this, for example, the coffee shop page. And now I'm going to do the same setup. So I'm going to add a tablet. I'm going to add a mobile phone. And now, instead of the ready-made pages, I'm going to jump to the building blocks. So I can see here the same navigation. I'm just simply going to put it on here, and you can see that it already adds the same. Now we need to repeat the setup that we had before, which is great, so you can see that again. So let's select our primary page, and then remember, first step, we need a vertical setup. Then we need to center this. We need to make sure all of this is set to 0, so it starts from the top. And we now want to set this to hug the content, so we see exactly as much as we have here. The resizing, the fill container, we're going to do at the end, but we could also do it individually with all of them. So you can just select the element, and then you can turn this to fill the container in order to resize. So let's add some more elements. Let's add maybe just a little hero. Let's add that on here. And then if you don't have it in the order you want, you can simply use your up and down keys to change that. And also notice over here you have some options. So for example, you could hide the logo and the button group, or maybe just one button. And so I'm just going to add some images as well. So let's have a look. Is that under card? So what I can do is I can just add this one here, then maybe a larger image. And if you have something like this, let's add some more text as well. Then what you might want is you might want to add some spacing in between these. So you could add this here, but this is going to add spacing to everything. So I don't recommend this. So what I recommend is doing, if you select those two and then you turn them into an auto layout group as well. Again, this might be just a little bit more tricky. So what you do is you hit Shift and A, and it's going to turn it into an auto layout group. And now all you need to do, you can set the gap inside of here now. And you could also set some padding, for example, top and bottom. So for example, now you would have a little gap in between here. And by the way, you can also set a background color if you wanted this. There's some preset colors here for you. So you can use those, and you can set any background color, for example. Now, if we want to add images here, then we do that the same as before. Simply click on here and then use the fill image, and you can upload images from your computer. And again, also here, if you want to change the order, then you can simply select the element, and then with your up and down keys, you can change this around. And also you can change any text here, and it's going to reflect across breakpoints. Now, if we have a look at the preview of this page, you can see that it sits nicely, but again, we have this weird jump. So remember, we have to set everything to fill. So we have it set here already. So we could go through each of these elements and then simply set them all to fill the container, or you can use the little trick, hit enter, and now you have all of them selected, and now set them to fill the container. So let's have a look again. And you can see that this now resizes nicely. Actually, have a look here, it jumps. And this is because we grouped this. So we need to go inside of this group and then just make sure that this is also set to fill the container. So if we're now having a look, then now it should run smoothly and we can see this really nice behavior. Now let's just connect the pages. So in order to do that, you simply select the element that you want to connect. So I could have the entire thumbnail, or only the picture, or maybe only this link over here. It's up to you. Then go to interactions And then all you need to do is you're going to drag out a little interaction, and you can see it pulls it out from all breakpoints over here to cafe. And now if we're having a look at this, we can see our page here. We click on our link and it's going to bring us to cafe. Let's just make sure to add a breadcrumb here to go back. You can always do that later. Let's jump back into design, navigation. Here we have our little breadcrumb. Let's add that in here. Again, if you add a new element, make sure you set it to fill the container. And we can now go back with a link to our main page. Remember, you can change any text, and just like this, you have a pretty nice working website. Customizing your colors. So let's learn a little bit about how colors work in our library and how we can customize them. So colors in Figma are generally set up in something called variables. So in your library, and again, this might look a little different once you look at it. This is the first version. However, the setup should be quite the same. So you'll find an overview of your colors. So this is the current brand colors I am using in this library, and you find a little screenshot, but you can't really change anything there. If you select a color, for example, this red, then in your fills menu, you can see that this is brand/primary. And so here's a little clip so I could detach this color, and this will be sort of a pure color so I could see the hex code. But let's just go back, because what we want is whenever we use a color for anything in our design, we want to use a variable. So via this menu, click on this little icon and then you can access the variables that I set up for you already. So what's really important if you're setting up any elements is that everything on this element is set up in a variable. We don't want to see any hex code ever in your final design. So for example, let's have a look at this one. And so if we select this, a good way to see if you caught all of them is in your right-hand side property panels, go to the bottom and you see something called selection colors. And then you should see all of this using this variables notation. So you don't want to see anything like that, even if it's just the background. So the way that you can add colors is you select the elements, and then in the fill menu, you use the little icon here, and then you're going to choose those. So I like separating it into text colors, then brand colors, and then have some neutrals for things like background. But there are very different ways in which you can set that up. So feel free to experiment with your own setup as well. You can always change them. So for example, if you're selecting this text here, then via this fill menu, you can simply click on here and then you could choose any other color as well. Now, the place where those colors live and where you can edit them and add them and organize all of that is in the variables panel. So click on your background of your canvas, and then on the right hand side, you should see something called variables, and you can open this setting. If you don't see the colors right away, make sure that via the collection drop down, you choose the colors. And here you can see all the colors the way I set them up. Again, you can change those colors. For example, let's actually, for our primary, just change that to a purple. And then we could also add variables. So just click on the plus button. You can add another color variable. So you could just add any variable to your liking, and then it's going to show up in the menu. You might also note that I have a light mode and a dark mode set up. So you can add modes by clicking on the little plus button here. So if we go back to our design, then now you can see that all of this here changed. So all of my buttons that were red, and now the variable has changed. Because I'm using the variable everywhere, I only need to change it at this one place. So this is my single source of truth. Now we can also see the dark mode, so you can select this hero over here, or actually let's select one of them. I think it's probably the best if you just pull out an instance. So here we have an instance, and now what we can do is over here you find some sort of little switch, and if you click on that switch, you then see your different variables collections, and for example here the color, and I can change this to dark mode. Now, it's best to just leave everything on a default mode, so the first mode in your collection. So let's update this and jump over to our design. So in order to see it in our design, click on the little library button when you see this little bubble here asking you to update, and then publish the new library with the changes. So let's jump over to our design, and then you need to go back until you see the thumbnail and the little icon here. Click on it and you can now accept the updates. And now have a look what's happening with this button, and you can see we now have the new color we changed. Now you can also use your mode here, so you can just select this entire section, and then over here you have the little switch again, and you can now switch to the dark mode, and then you see everything changing to dark mode. And note how this is still in red because we never changed the color actually in our dark mode. You can also access all of these colors inside of your site. So for example, if you're selecting this text and you just want to make changes right here, then via your fill menu, if you click on it, you're going to see that it updated automatically all of your color variables, so you can also access them right inside of here. So let's also have a look at our typography and how we can use and customize this. So again, let's first understand how this is set up. As usual, this is the first version of this library. Might look slightly different, but you're generally going to use something called styles and variables for this. So typography setup is in general a little more complex. I recommend that if you're new to this, that you stick a little bit to the setup I gave you. I'm going to give you a quick overview, but again, if you're a total beginner in Figma, this might be a little bit challenging, but just stick with me. So what I made here, and this is something that I like setting up, this is nothing that comes with Figma, is just an overview of your design. So generally I name the styles. So I have display, headline L, M, and so on. And then I have some body and buttons. And again, you can absolutely customize this to your liking. You can take stuff away, add stuff just as you need it for your design. Now what you see here, this is a preview, and this preview is actually using something called a style. So if I select this, then you can see over here in the typography that this is not called display. And here, if you can see, just as with color variables before, you can see the different text styles. Now, if you click on the canvas background and you see a preview of your styles over here, and for example, in the display one I just showed you, we can open this and then we can alter the settings. And you can also see that some stuff, like I like using line height like this because I personally like using a percentage here, but you can see that some stuff is used as a variable. So if it's in this little box here, or this one here just says font, so that is a variable. So we also have a collection which we put into these text styles. Again, this is nothing you have to do. You could literally just take this one out and just type an 80 in here and you would have the same result. So if you're a beginner, you might want to do this, but I'm just using a little bit more of a sophisticated way, which means that if I go right to the end of this line, I see a little variable symbol and I now choose the size from my variable setup. So let's have a look what that looks like. And again, if you're a beginner, you might just want to set this all up by hand and skip this one. So we have our collection, go to typography. And here you can see what I did is we have the font. So I'm using Poppins here. So let's say you want to change the font on your entire document and it pulls in Google Fonts automatically. You can just go to Google Fonts, the website, and then you can see all the different fonts. So you can then just type in the name here. Let's say I want to change all of this to Inter. Then I would just have to put that in here. And then all of my fonts, so we change to Inter. So I don't have to go one by one by one. So this is super, super handy. Now here you can see the different sizes. So this is display on desktop, then headline L on desktop, and you can see that I could individually change them for the different modes. In this case, this is desktop, tablet, and mobile that I am using. So just to see it, let's make this ridiculously large. Let's add this like a 100 so we can just see that it works. So all I need to do, I need to change this here. And this is now, as you can see, this is really large now, and this is Inter now. So you can't really see it here, but if I would detach this and I would detach this font here as well, then you can see that this is now Inter. However, we want to keep this intact. So you can see that all I have to do is this, and now this is going to be reflected across all my designs. So you can see here, we've got a really, really big headline suddenly. And now the way we use this in here is just as I showed you before with the preview. So for example, this one, you can see that in typography, I'm using display. If I would want another one, I could just choose another headline from here. And this is pulling in the styles. So you will always deal with the styles, and then the styles are pulling in the variables. So now we're getting a tiny bit more complicated, because what's happening here is we always just use our general style, and then the style knows, let's just remind ourselves, the style knows which mode. So this is the default. So we always operate on a desktop. So somehow if we're going here on our tablet, we need to tell this style that it's a tablet now. So what happens is we select this, and then the little switch that we have over here, you go to typography. I also made one up for spacing, but we're interested in typography now, and you need to tell it to be a tablet, because per default what would happen, it would look like this. And so we're just going to tell it, please use the tablet mode. So all the typography tablet mode for this. And then you can see the same here for the mobile. If we select this, you can see that everything is set up for mobile. So again, if you're new to Figma, this might be a little bit overwhelming. So I would recommend just stick to my setup for now. If you want to dive in deeper here, I recommend that you really familiarize with typography styles and variable first. If you're familiar with Figma, then this will make a lot of sense to you. Now, if we want to use this in our design, the usual, we just need to update our library. So let's publish all of these changes. Now let's jump over to our design and let's update our library, and now have a look how this should become quite large, and also we're going to see inter instead of pop-ins appearing here. And because everything is also already baked into the components, you don't need to change much here. So you can see this is automatically gonna pick this up, but you're gonna see it down here in appearance that this is using tablet and that this, for example, is using mobile. One last little thing that I might have forgotten to point out, so I just went back here on my original settings, is if you want to add a style, so we saw how to add variables. So let's just remind ourselves, if you want another variable, you just click on the plus button, and this time you don't use color, you just add another number variable, and then you could just define that to your liking. And if you want to add another style, then what you could do is you could define it over here. So you can click on plus and just add a text style, and then you get this window and you can just set it up. But I actually find it easier to create my own style. Let's say I want another headline. I pull this out, I detach it, and then I would set this up completely to my liking. Let's just add anything like sort of randomly that we would want. So I would detach everything, and then I would set this up the way I want. And once I'm ready with this, I would go over here in my typography panel and then add it from here. So I go to styles, and then I create this new styles. And you would then find that if you click on the background inside here, inside your styles, and I would then create another field and document this in my overview. So this overview is nothing compulsory. This is really just something for you to remind yourself how all of this is working. So let me show you how to create components to use them in Figma Sites, either to extend an existing library or to set up your own. Little side note before we dive in, if you want to build your own libraries, then you really need to understand Figma's features. So you cannot get away with just guessing and trying out. If you want to do this, you need to understand variables, typography styles and variables, components, component properties, and very important, Figma auto layout. So follow along. It might still give you a good overview if you know the basics of Figma, but if you're serious about this, then please make sure that you jump into a sound beginner's course and that you really understand those principles to the core. So let's add a component to our library to understand how this all works in the background and all the settings around it. So when setting up components, then we also need a few building blocks that feed into them. So I already set up my colors in variables, and I have my typography styles. So let's just remind ourselves. Here you can see the different typography styles. And then if we check into variables, we have different collections. So I'm going to use these color styles on my component, which I will create. I have an additional collection I made. This is not necessary, but it's quite handy, and you can even get more sophisticated on this one. So for example, I have the screen size as a variable. So this is a desktop, tablet, and mobile. And then I have some padding that would change accordingly. Again, you can absolutely set this up to your liking. And remember, I also have my typography sizes set up in such a way that this automatically pulls in the different sizes for the different breakpoints. So in our component, this is coming all together now. So I'm going to add a gallery and I'm going to place this on my card group section. So what the sections actually do is that you have different ways that you can keep stuff organized. So on one hand in the file we have our pages, so we have our building blocks. Let me just give you that overview. So this is this page, then we have our wireframes and our designs. So this is how I set this up. You could set this up completely different way. And then on my different pages I use sections. So you find sections down here. You have frames or you have sections. You can also use the shortcut Shift and S. So whenever you place something on a different page or different section, let's have a look here in our library. You can see this is the library. So first we see the different pages, and then if we jump into the building blocks, so let me remind you, this would be this page here. Then inside we can see the different sections we created. So here we have the card groups, which is where we're going to add our new component. So it should show up here. This is really great because what it also means is that you can simply drag components from one section to another to keep everything reorganized or renamed nicely. So for now, let's zoom into this one and let's add our own component. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to press F and I'm going to draw a frame. And now I want this frame size to be the size of my desktop. And I already set up a variable for it. I could also just type this in by hand, but I have a variable. So I'm just going to go here, dimensions, and you see screen size, and I'm going to use this one. Now I'm going to add a headline. So I'm going to press T to type something, and I'm just going to name this headline. And then I'm going to keep this quite simple. So I'm just going to have a rectangle, and I'm just going to create some rectangles here, and then later I want them to sort of like just move, literally like a little moving gallery through this. Let's make them a little larger, and let's just add this here. So I'm keeping this quite simple. And you can also investigate all the other examples that I added here. For example, here you can see this is like nested cards. So you can jump here and you can see where this card was originally built. So you can really sort of nest and go very sophisticated. But I'm just going to show you a simple setup and then you can take it from there and explore it further. So we're going to name this one, and I'm just going to name this gallery. And now I'm going to add some auto layouts. And again, you will not be able to get around auto layouts anymore if you want to set up your own components. So first of all, I'm going to nest these. So I'm going to select them all. And you can see I have no auto layout settings. So I'm going to use the shortcut to create a frame around it, which is Shift A. It creates an auto layout frame around it, which you can see here. I'm going to name this cards. And now we can see the settings over here. This is horizontal. We have a gap. Let's just make this a multiple of 8, actually maybe a little larger. And then we're also going to add some padding left and right. So actually if we have let's keep it at the 40 here for now. And then let's have a 20 over here. And then that should do the trick. And now we're going to add auto layout for this whole thing. So I think I can get away with just adding it to the parent. Let's just see. And here it's a frame, so I already see the menu. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to center all of this. So let's make sure this is all centered. Okay, great. We could adjust the gap and everything, but I'm just going to leave it like this for now. And then I'm going to pull out a copy. And now I want this to be the desktop. And now remember, I worked in such a way that I have variables for spacing. Otherwise, you can do this by hand. So I have desktop, I have tablet, so I can just use those here. I haven't used these spacing variables. And then with typography, it's the same. So I have to make sure, first of all, that I'm setting up everything with variables. I'm just going to check this now, and then it should pull in the right typography size and any changes. So first of all, just to show you over here, I'm using these paddings. So I'm adding padding left and right, so that would adapt. I really don't need it in this setup, but I still have it in the background in case I need it. So what I didn't do yet is I didn't check that everything is set up with styles and variables. So the headline, it automatically gave me a headline L, so that is fine. And now I just need to make sure that my colors are also variables. So here I'm just going to take this from the background. I think this should be This one I don't need. This one I'm going to turn into images in a second. So this one is a text color. You could also just pick it from over here. So you see it's a text color. And even the background is very important that your background color, that this is also set up in color variables. So actually I'm just going to delete this and then I have it here. I'm going to have a copy, and you can always check that all your selection colors are variables. And I forgot about my little images again. So let's just go back here again. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up as an image fill. So I have this out of the way, and anybody consuming this component later on knows that this is the place where I expect them to add images. Okay, so now we should be fine. And now all we need to do, we have appearance over here. And because we're using everything with variables, it's all the information is already stored in those different collections. So now I'm doing spacing and I'm going to tablet. And then I also want the color, that doesn't change. And then the typography, I also want this to be the tablet. So you can see this is adjusting. And now we can do the same for our mobile. So you see I have them open and I'm going mobile. And I'm going mobile. You don't need it on your desktop because it's the first mode. Sometimes I quite like adding it just so everything is set up the same way. But as it is the default mode, usually you don't need it. And so what we can do now, we can now select all of these. And then with one click, I'm going with the little drop down, create component set. I quite like to make this outline a little thicker so it's visible. And then I usually just amplify it a little bit just for my better overview. Okay, so let's just pull one out. Actually, let's pull those two out. And then we can see, yeah, that just behaves the way I expect it to. Now you can see that I still have an error. So what I need to do is I need to name them. And remember, our naming is desktop, mobile, and desktop, tablet, and mobile. So let's select this. And I'm just going to rename all of them. And then I can also select the entire group and I can name this breakpoint. Okay, great. Tablet, desktop, and then you should see in the drop down our mobile. Fantastic. Now I can add one little thing. And again, this is a little more advanced, but it's quite handy because in appearance, you can add a component property. And so you can click plus here and then I can just say show headline, create the property. And I'm going to add this here as well. So I'm just going to select it and then it should see it. So I can select it from here because I'm in the same component set. And now if I'm selecting this, you can see over here later on, we can just choose if we want this component with or without headline. So this is really nice later when we're consuming it. Okay, so that looks good so far. Let's test it. So what we're going to do is we want to publish this library. So let's update it. So let's jump into our design file and then let's update. Let's receive those updates. Okay, great. So now if we jump into the section we placed it on, which was card groups, we should see our gallery and you can see it's right here. And now we can simply drag this and it should now populate all the different breakpoints directly. Let's have a look, and that works really well. And so this only works because we use the naming convention desktop, tablet, and mobile, so it knows what to do with it. Okay, great. So what we need to do now, let's just preview this, and then we can see that we need probably a few auto layout settings because they're not transferred automatically. So everything inside it keeps, but you need to tell it how this block should sit inside of here. So we do our usual, we select our parent frame and that's already set up to a vertical auto layout. Then we select this frame we just added and we just make sure that this is set to fill the container. So let's have a look what this looks like now. And yeah, that looks great. That's the sort of effect we want. Now we want this to be rotating, and right now we can only do this in Figma Sites, so we cannot add this to our library. So we need to grab the element here and then jump to interactions, add an interaction and add a marquee interaction. You can see this is the sort of thing we want. You could change that, so the speed, the direction and everything. I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. So now let's have a look. That is the wrong side. Let's select this side here. Press play, and that looks wonderful. And the important part actually is that we have a little bit of padding left and right, otherwise they would stick together. Let me just show you this. So what we did here, if you select this, then you can see we have padding left and right of this, otherwise they stick together, so just be aware of that. Okay, so let's just add some images. I'm just going to speed this up for you in the background. And so let's have a look. That looks great. Let's make sure our resizing works. But actually, it's giving me this weird jump again. So sometimes when you add an animation, that happens. So you just need to go back in and just make sure this is set to fill the container, or whatever way actually you want this to work. So let's try again. And now we're having a really nice behavior. So you can also use your presets up here. If you want to change anything about this component, so for example, let's say you want to have all of these here actually with like rounded corners. Let's select all of them, little shortcut, hit enter, and then you're getting all the child elements, and then we're just adding a little bit of round corners. And then we're going to update. By the way, a little side note, if you're using nested elements, here we have it all on one element, but here, for example, where we have a nested card, let's just jump to this card. If you put a little understroke in the naming, then it's not gonna update the library, because we only want to give the full components in our library later inside. So this is a way you can hide those. Little side note. So let's publish this. And then once this is updated, we need to also jump over again. Let's make sure that this is really updated. Publish. Yes. Let's make sure that we jump over here. And now we need to go back all the way until we see our thumbnail. And we're going to receive this. And now have a look what happens to the corners. So update all. And you can see this directly receives the update. Now, during this course, I'm going to refer to a lot of Figma features like components, auto layout, and variables. If you're used to Figma, then this will be all very natural to you. However, if you're new to Figma, then this might be a little overwhelming. I'll not cover these concepts in this course. However, with your Skillshare membership, you can jump into my Figma beginners course. So in projects and resources, I added a direct link. You can just click on that. Now this will lead you directly to this course. The course is 4 hours long, and it starts with all the basics, which you might or might not want to go through. If you only want to look into certain concepts like components or variables, for example, the difference between variables and styles, something very important for typography, then you can just jump to these sections and I explain all of that from the beginning. Also auto layout, as you can see here. If you want to go the extra mile, then you can find more things in this course, like how to prototype with Figma, how to collaborate, and there's even a course project for your portfolio. This is also by far my most popular course on Skillshare, and as you can see in the reviews, people have been very happy about it. So jump in and learn more about Figma.